Should I wait for the show to come up?
Tell a story.
There we go. So today we have set out to create a dialogue for you all around justice in three parts: understanding, reconciliation, and action. I'll be speaking to you about what I believe is the most challenging of these, which is reconciliation. I say this as someone who truly believes in the importance, the centrality of reconciliation, and as someone who currently stands entrenched in the process of trying to build it at the heart of the world's greatest humanitarian crisis, the global migrant and refugee crisis. It's from this place at the heart of it that I want to speak to you about the enormous challenges of creating a just reconciliation. My work as an anthropologist, a writer, and a filmmaker is centered on international human rights, on how they are equally, but more often unequally, applied to different populations around the world. For as long as I can remember, my driving passion has been defending the basic human rights of the most vulnerable, those who have been forced to flee their homes because of violence, persecution, and extreme poverty. I've spent the past decade of my life living between the US and North Africa, Libya, Algeria, and Morocco, where I work with the world's largest population of migrants and refugees who are currently trapped under brutal conditions there. I know it's difficult for us to imagine when we gather together in a beautiful space like this, that at this very moment, there are more than 68 million people around the world who have been forced to flee their homes. It's hard to even imagine what 68 million people looks like. To give you an idea of the magnitude of this crisis, that's 1 in every 100 people in the world who don't have a country to call home, and over half of them are children. I'd like to begin my talk with a request. I'd like to ask each of you if you'd be willing to take a few minutes to step outside of this space with me and step into the journeys that the 68 million are living. To help us make this leap, I'm going to draw on excerpts of a poem by Warsan Shire, who's a storyteller, a poet, and a Somali refugee. She reflects on her own experiences in her work. No one leaves home unless home is the mouth of a shark. You only run for the border when you see the whole city running too. Your neighbors running faster than you. The boy you went to school with is forced to carry a gun bigger than his body now. You only leave home when home won't let you stay. It's not something you thought about doing, and so when you do, you carry your anthem under your breath, tearing up and burning each page of your passport, making it clear that you will never be going back. You have to understand, no one puts their children in a boat unless the water is safer than the land. Who would choose to spend days and nights locked in the stomach of a truck unless the miles traveled meant more than the journey? No one would choose to climb over razor wire fences, to be beaten until even your shadow leaves you, raped, drowned, forced to the bottom of the boat because you are darker, to be sold, enslaved, starved, shot at the border like a sick animal, lose your name, lose your family. See if you can make a refugee camp a home for a year or 2 or maybe 10. And if you survive, you're greeted on the other side with go home blacks, refugees, dirty immigrants, asylum seekers, sucking our country dry of milk, dark, with your hands out, smell strange, savage. Look what they've done to their own countries. What will they do to ours? But the dirty looks in the street, they're a little softer than a limb torn off. Insults are easier to swallow than rubble, than your child's body in pieces at your feet. For now, you must forget about pride. Your survival is more important. I want to go home. But my home is the mouth of a shark. My home is the barrel of a gun. What I find most powerful about combining research and art, whether it is poetry by artists like Warsan Shire or films that I create myself, is that it has the ability to humanize these complex political issues and to remind audiences that even in the masses, there is always the story of one. Take, for instance, this boy named Alsani Diallo. Among his brotherhood, he's better known as Bambino because he's so scrawny for his age. I first met Bambino 3 summers ago. He was 12 years old and had just arrived to our hidden forest camp, fresh off a 3,000-mile journey across the continent on his own. He was the eldest son in his family, and after losing both of his parents to war, it was his responsibility to take care of his younger siblings. I had no choice, he tells me as we sit together in our camp one night. I could stay in my home country and watch my little brother and sister die, or I could leave and try to find a new home for us. A home where they might be able to go to school for the first time, where I might be able to find work and feed us well. First, I traveled to the bigger cities, but they weren't any better than my village, so I traveled past my country's borders. I'd never even left my village before, and suddenly I was alone in a foreign country. I walked for days and I hitched rides in the backs of smugglers' trucks. I slept on the street and I begged for change. I met many other boys who left their homes, but it seemed like no countries wanted us, so we kept traveling north. Here we are now, in Morocco, at our final border crossing. We've all traveled so far, we've sacrificed so much. You can ask any one of us and we will tell you the same thing. We'll make it to Europe or we'll die trying. There is no other way home for us now. Bambino's story is singular, yet his experience is representative of a population of millions who are being denied their most basic rights at Europe's southernmost borders across North Africa. According to the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, all citizens of the world, every one of us gathered here in this room, is entitled to a few basic rights. Most central among these is the right to seek refuge in another country if we are no longer safe in our own. Yet, what many don't understand is that in order to gain refugee status, you first have to make it to a country where the United States Refugee Agency is operating. One way to deal with a growing migrant and refugee crisis, then, is to secure our borders and keep people from ever having the chance to apply for refugee status in the first place. So the question is, how do we begin moving towards a just reconciliation at our world's most critical borders, where international human rights law is being unequally applied? The concept of reconciliation, it's been known to cause some controversy among activist communities, and I think there's good reason for that. There's good reason to question who reconciliation serves. Are we asking the oppressors to reconcile with the oppressed? Or are we instead asking the oppressed to reconcile with their very oppressors? Reconciliation, a noun, means the restoration of friendly relations, the restoration of balance between two parties, the action of making one belief compatible with another. But in times or places where one group holds the power to oppress or to deny basic human rights, and one group lacks the power to fight, can we expect any process of reconciliation to be just? I turned to some of my friends in Bambino's Brotherhood just last week, and I asked them what a just reconciliation would mean to them. Kia, pictured here with her children, tells me, "Friendship is built on respect and trust. You must respect me as a fellow human, and I must trust that you will treat me with the same respect as you would any fellow human. Without that, there is no friendship, and there is no possibility for friendly relations. Pheno tells me balance is restored not when we both feel full, but when we feel as full as one another. If my pockets are empty and yours are full, we are bound to walk out of balance with one another. Lastly, Mamadou Salou tells me, I do not need to believe everything that you believe in order to respect you and your rights to the basic things that all humans desire: food, warmth, water, community, love, purpose. But I do need to believe that what you believe does not strip me of my rights to those same things. You can believe in a different God, you can believe in no God, but to believe that you are deserving of rights that I am not, that is incompatible with my existence. I value the call to reconciliation as one that has united the different religious traditions for as long as people have turned to sacred texts. The call for us to protect those who are forced to seek refuge in new lands has also been ever present. Followers of the Christian tradition are taught that the entirety of religious law is fulfilled in keeping this one commandment: love your neighbor as yourself. In Islam, followers are instructed to think of all of humanity through the prism of the human body. When any limb aches, the whole body reacts with sleeplessness and fever. When you hurt others, you are hurting yourself because you are part of the same organism. Followers of the Hindu tradition are taught to perform karma for the benefit of humanity without expecting benefits for the self. Only then can one acquire the wealth of immortality. It was Buddha who instructed his followers, in whom there is no sympathy for living beings, know him as an outcast. Not the foreigner, but he or she among you who has no sympathy for the foreigner, that is the outcast among you. The call to protect the refugee is perhaps most present in modern Judaic teachings, where there remains an intimate awareness of the dangers of turning away those who flee persecution. Our refugee and asylum laws, after all, only came into existence at the end of World War II. Across religious traditions, there remains a desire to establish relationships that are rooted in love and understanding. Reconciliation moves us closer to these kinds of relationships, but they are impossible unless they are entered into willingly by both parties and unless all voices are heard equally. Thank you.
Perfect.